Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the Brazilian 1908/34 Mauser rifle, the rifle that has some really good features and some pretty misunderstood history. Now before we talk about this exact model, we need to go back in history a little bit, talk about when the Brazilians first adopted the Mauser, and that is the Brazilians adopted the what they designated as their 1894 Mauser rifle. Now the Brazilian 1894 is not really related to the Swedish 94 carbine. The Brazilian 1894 is really pretty much just a straight up Spanish 93 copy. It looks almost exactly identical to the Spanish 93. It looks identical to the Chilean 1895. And that's what they had. You know, they weren't the only ones to get this early, model of Mauser. Now there's sort of an arms race in South America. You have all the South American countries kind of competing against each other with wanting to update their Mauser rifles. And kind of all around this time, you see the various countries in South America, buying the latest models of Mausers to arm themselves with. And Brazil's no exception to that. In fact, Brazil placed a huge order for the 1908 model. They ordered some earlier versions of the German 1898 export models, but this is the one they ordered the most of, the 1908. DWM made a ton of them. Obendorf made a few that DWM, I guess, couldn't complete the order of. But this is the pretty much the main Mauser rifle of the Brazilians. It's a long rifle, straight bolt handled, with a few exceptions, kind of like the handguard and the sight. This is very, very similar to the German 1898 rifle. So, overall, this is a really good rifle. Now, they ordered mostly long rifles, but they did order some carbines, and I'll touch on that kind of later on. Now the Brazilians had a bunch of these 1908s in service during the Paulista Rebellion of 1932, which is a really interesting thing. I did a video about sort of that rebellion and about the rifle, but the takeaway for this video is that in 1932, a province or two of Brazil basically rebelled. They realized that they need guns to rebel, so they placed an order for these. This is kind of what's known as the Brazilian Revolutionaries rifle or the Paulista rifle. Now this is a special export version of the Czech VZ24 rifle. Of course there's some, a couple big differences between the standard VZ24 and this version, namely the turn down bolt handle and the fact that this is chambered in 7mm. I did a whole video on this if you want to learn more about this specific gun. But for the point of this video, Paulistas ordered like tens of thousands of these guns, and obviously they lost. So all of these guns end up in the Brazilian military's hands, and they kind of see kind of the good qualities of this gun. They see what they like about it. Obviously they have these 1908 long rifles and everything, and they know that they need a new turn down bolt handle short rifles. They need a bunch of these now. Just to kind of keep up with times and everything. And now what I've heard is, and I hate speculating because there's just so little, there's no like Brazilian Mauser book really, like in English at least. There's just very little concrete information on these Brazilian rifles. But one of the things I heard, and I hate to speculate, but one of the things I heard was that it was kind of this Paulista rifle that influenced this next purchase here, with what the video is about. Obviously now we're right after World War II, so you kind of only really have like two main makers of Mausers here in the early 30s, which is pretty much CZ and Brno, and then you have the FN plant in Belgium. So really they're kind of limited. They're going to buy one or the other, and actually they did buy some 1922 Mausers from FN. That was their own kind of little proprietary deal, but they go back because they want to stick with the standard German 1898 pattern, which is compatible with their 98 rifles. And that's when they decide to order these guys here, the 1908/34 rifles. Now, this rifle, it's made by CZ, it's made in Brno. So it's kind of interesting how CZ armed the rebels that rebelled against Brazil, and then Brazil, I guess they didn't hold a grudge or anything, and they straight up ordered these. Now there's only like one book that gives any information about this, but that book says that they ordered 100,000 of these, 100,500, Kind of a weird number of these 1908/34s. That seems to be a really huge number. Like that seems to be kind of like you're rearming your armed forces or whatever. But Liberty Tree collectors and the reference library, they have one of these that they refer to as a police carbine. So I'm not exactly sure if these went to the military and police, like if there's really like, the lines are kind of blurred there, or if this is mostly a military gun. But this is what the Brazilians order. Brazilian Mausers are really just interesting. Like there's so many different little like models. Like I said, the FN 1922. You have the Revolutionary Rifle. Then you have the 1908/34. And then right after the 1908/34, they ordered the Mauser 1935 model from Mauser Oberndorf. They ordered long rifles and the short rifles like this guy here. There's just a plethora of interesting Brazilian rifles out there. Now I need to talk a bit about model designations with the Brazilians, because you might, just from the title of this video, you might be a little confused maybe about this 1908/34s, or maybe you might be thinking of the 08/34. The Brazilian 08/34 and 30 caliber is a different rifle than the 1908/34. Now, it was sometime in like the 50s or 60s, the Brazilians just got like a crap ton of 30-06 from the United States. It's probably just surplus because in the 50s or 60s, the United States is switching over to 7.62 by 51, not really needing all this 30-06 ammo. And Brazil was an ally of the United States and the Allies in World War I. The Brazilian Expeditionary Force actually, sent men to fight in Europe. They chose to. They actually wanted to go to Europe and fight. It wasn't like the Allies took them and dragged them to Europe to fight. They chose to do that. So they probably got a pretty sweetheart deal maybe on the 3.06, or at least I'd hope so. But I mean, Brazil's and South America's 7mm ammo that they were getting, their main source of that was from European countries like Germany that were manufacturing their 7mm for export. And of course, after World War I, not a lot of countries in Europe are making the 7mm anymore. So the Brazilians, they get a ton of this 30-06. They had a program specifically where they wanted to domestically convert their rifles to 30-06. They converted not only 1908/34 rifles to 30-06, they also converted 1908, the older 1908 Mauser rifles. They converted those to 30-06 as well. Both of those are going to be marked as if they're made in Brazil, and they're both going to be marked with 08/34 30 caliber on the receiver ring. And those also have just straight up Brazilian wood on it. They don't have the European stocks like these guns do. Now the main way to think about it, and it's kind of hard because a lot of books don't really make this sort of distinction, but 08/34 30 cals are a completely different model from the 1908/34 in Mauser rifles, which are still in 7mm. That was the main reason why I bought this one, because this was an original unconverted one in 7mm. I love 7mm. I think it's a great cartridge, and I think overall this gun is a great Mauser rifle. Now let's get in and do some close-ups. So here on top we have the 1908/34. We have the Paulista rifle, and then we have the regular 1908. This is the long rifle. Doesn't fit all the way in frame here. But I think the main way to think about the 1908/34 is like the Brazilians kind of took their 1908, incorporated a lot of the features of this Paulista rifle, and kind of made this 1908/34. So first off, probably the most obvious change is we now have a turn down bolt. This 1908/34, not only does it have a turn down bolt, but it has a little stock inlet for the turn down. This is something that the early short rifle 1908s didn't have. Now the 1908/34, it has pretty much, the way you're looking at it now, it has the same exact sort of sling functionality as the 1908. You have this quick detach sling in the rear as it does on the 1908. You have this sort of parade button to put your sling in the parade function here. You have the hook up front to work as the parade hook for the sling. So you have all that same compatibility, but also now they want a side sling functionality. So here on the 1908 and the VZ24, there's both side sling compatibility, but I'd like it on the 1908-34 a little bit more because this has a quick detach functionality where this one does not. So you could, with using the standard Brazilian sling, you can quickly attach this to the side sling or the undersling position. For whatever reason, if you wanted to go back and forth, I think the side sling method is superior. But the 08-34, it gives the Brazilians the option of either having the rifle side slung, like it's probably going to be when they're in the field, or it can be underslung or underslung in the parade position for parades, which they still use these guns in parades. So that's another sort of key update to the 08-34. Now to show you some of the features up close of the 1908-34, we're going to start off, of course, with the model number here. Now this is specific to just this model. It'll say mod 1908/34. The other ones that were converted to 30-06, these will say mod 08-34, and then you'll see a little .30 on the side. So the other ones do not say 1908, they just say 08-34. So hence the confusion between these models. You of course have the beautiful Brazilian crest here on top of the receiver ring. I mean, this is probably one of my favorite just crests in general on any Mauser rifle. It's just a very intricate, just really nice looking crest here. This is, obviously this is on most Brazilian rifles except the Revolutionary rifle, of course. Now on the side rail, we have the manufacturer markings. So of course this is a CZ made rifle in Brno. Serial number and everything. This is just pretty standard serializing and proof markings on these guns. And other than that, pretty standard, pretty plain markings. You have some numbering on the bolt here, check proof marking on the bolt handle. And that's it. There's just not, a ton of markings to look for on these guns. Of course, if you're looking over one, you just want to see if the numbers match, but do not be surprised if your 1908/34 does not match. And here's the rear side on the 1908-34, just pretty standard, that, VZ24 style rear sight. You have the two push buttons. Starts at 200 meters, which, I wish it started down at 1. But, it's, I guess with the flat shooting 7mm, probably doesn't make that big of a difference. But I would say that's probably the one drawback of this gun, is that it doesn't go down to 100, which is probably just a little pet peeve. And here's the front sling, obviously the side sling, and then the undersling attachment points. That way you can kind of choose whichever way you want this. I know some people, if they're shooting in competitions or whatever, they like to have the rifles underslung so they can wrap the sling around their arm and do all that stuff. But walking around and carrying a rifle, the slide sling method is superior in my opinion. Now the front sight on the 1908-34, I guess they get an A for effort. It is at least a protected front sight. It has built-in protectors. I think having built-in protectors is better than no protectors, or at least the protectors that kind of clamp on like a VZ24 or a K98K. I like these better because they protect the front sight. These are a little small, and me just kind of playing around with the rifles, I could see how it'd be easy to pick up one of these little ears and think it's the front sight post when aiming quickly. I mean, if you're up close and dirty, I guess that doesn't make a huge difference with the accuracy, but I guess it's better than nothing. And you can see this one took a pretty sharp impact and it dented it. These aren't very strong at all. That's just a really thin piece of steel there, but I mean, it did its job. It protected the front sight blade. So, and again, this is specific to the 1908-34s. The 08-34s in 30-06, sometimes they'll have these if it's a conversion from one of these. Sometimes they won't if it's a conversion of the earlier 1908. But if it has this rear sight protector or front sight protector. This was originally a 1908/34 made by the Czechs. Now in the U.S. collecting market, these pure 1908/34 rifles, still in 7mm, are not super common. These are pretty hard to find, especially in good condition. Brazilian guns just, they were used hard in tons of different conflicts. They had some pretty big coups and stuff in their history. So these guns are well worn and well used guns. So finding a good one can be difficult sometimes, but when you do, I recommend pretty much picking it up. They're great quality guns. Now it's going to be hard to find a pure 1908/34 like this in 7mm. Most of the time when you run across a gun that looks just like this, it's going to be an 08/34 and 30 cal. Those are pretty much the most common ones that are out there. And if you like 30-06, or if you have a bunch of 30-06 or whatever, and you don't care, that's cool. Pick one of those up. Me personally, I prefer the original 7mm. I just love 7mm. It's not a very harsh recoiling round, and it still has great ballistics and great performance and everything. 30-06 is just a little too much. So I prefer the original ones over those. But you can get pretty good deals on both of them when you run across them out there. But then again, they're not too common. The weird thing is that there's way more. They ordered way more of these. Like I said, I think about 100,000 of these. But I've run across way more of these Revolutionary rifles, which are far less common for some reason. Also, I don't think I've seen a Revolutionary rifle converted to 30-06 for some reason. Always just see these still in 7mm. So when you find like an 08/34, it can have one of these front sight protectors, or sometimes it'll have no front sight protector. If it has no front sight protector, it was probably converted from an earlier 1908 Mauser to this gun. Thank you so much, guys, for watching all this. Thanks for supporting and everything. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Here's a clip of the baby, and I'll see you next time.